What is going on, you guys? It's your boy. Honestly, Abe's an asshole here, and we are back with episode 106 of the video game therapy series. I want to say it's been a while, but I know it has, and I don't want to say that because I'm done making those excuses for these. I tend to be very streaky in making these. It seems like I can do a couple days in a row, and then I'll go a week or so without doing it. And I don't know what that says about my either the nature of this work or the nature of the way that my mind and productivity work. I think I don't know that humans are necessarily designed for very long, sustained efforts. I think efforts are very short, dense, and compact, followed by periods of rest. So maybe there's an evolutionary argument to the fact that I am lazy with these. It's not one that I'll hide behind per se, but one I think is interesting nonetheless. So I imagine that would fit the model of the feast and famine kind of archetype of, I guess, prehistoric or pre-civilized humans that I don't know, did kind of fit this like almost like this work hard, play hard, where it's like you might work hard for a few days or during most of the day and then played it. I was like, I don't think it was meant to have this very structured thing. I think it was meant to be more in spurts or in streaks. And I don't know, that's just, I'm not an anthropologist, but potentially a working theory. Yeah, so the first thing I want to talk about is with the, of course, is as the resident internet historian, I believe one big downside, or not really downside, I guess it's upside if you're, I guess, a little too rosy on, I guess, the way the world works. One, I'll say externality of the internet was this allure of infinite scalability in the sense that no longer were things on an individual level. Everything is scalable to, again, potentially to a global level, right? Whereas companies now are all global. There's hardly any big company that is local to one area. Everything does have this global influence, but I worry that's a bigger problem when speaking about, I guess, particularly, I'll say even like social or moral issues where, and even political issues, I don't think necessarily should be these global issues. I think that often leads people to ignore problems right in front of them, and instead, well, the world's kind of freaking out about this problem, but in my community, these are the issues. And it's like, well, I'm a global citizen now, so I have to care about the world's problems. But then it's like, that also kind of absolves a lot of, and kind of trivializes the individual change. So I guess the quote that battles this is like, be the change you want to see in the world. But often that's overshadowed by the fact that, like, well, the world is in your face all the time, everything that the world is doing. So like you making a trivial change, like you eating better, or I don't know, getting exercise, or I guess doing something nice for somebody, even something as simple as that, is like, well, who fucking cares? Like, as long like that didn't solve poverty. All it did was just, help you out, and that's just being selfish. It's like, well, on a certain level, it's like that really is the only thing you have control over anyway. So as it doesn't really help the global problems by one person freaking out about it and caring more about the global problems than problems with themselves. So that's why I am a bit more of an individualist than someone concerned with global problems, because I realize that there are, and I actually would argue that there's almost no impact that someone like me could have on something like poverty, right? On the global scale. The only impact I could have is on the local level. But the issue is when you wrap yourself up in all these global issues, you have little capacity or little idea of where to start. So if like your goal on some level or your aspiration is to, solve world hunger, it's like, all right, well, that's a ridiculous. So I guess the logical place to start, we go, well, are there any hungry people in my local vicinity? And it's like, well, I would argue that even everybody working together on that problem couldn't even solve it, because most people are too concerned, and it's also too easy to not. It's hard to see any influence. I think part of what humans need to see is progress towards some goal, and if the goal is like immeasurable, right, and is almost so far out of our conceivable scope of impact, it's almost, you're not really motivated to do anything because it's like, what am I? It's impossible. It's not even like I'm fighting an uphill battle. The hill is sloping backwards behind me. I can't, there's no even way I can contort myself to be able to move this. And it's also, it's getting higher every time. It's not like it's a standstill thing. So I don't know. I'm very much not concerned with the world's problems, unfortunately, only because I realize the limited scope of my impact. I'm always more concerned with immediately what I'm able to do, such that I represent and again, I guess it is a quote, be the change you want to see in the world, but I don't know that it's about me parading about different changes I see. I think it's part of it just me living the change and not talking about it, it's almost just like it's more, people are more concerned now with the skeptical, or not the skeptical, the spectacle of what they do, right? And I even think about this like in the context of something even as simple as, we'll say, like buying groceries, for example. So somebody that buys groceries, like I would argue now that there's even like a subset, because you go into people's homes and they have like all these different like beans and flavorings and different things, like things that they've never even touched. They bought, presumably at some point they thought this was a good idea and they bought it, and then now it's just, they're all just rotting in their in their cupboard. And you're like, what the, why, why'd you buy all this if you know you're not going to eat it? It's like buying bananas and then just to have them rot on the counter. But I even argue that there's some amount of like influence, and I don't know where this influence exactly originates or how to counteract it, or really anything beyond that. But I posit that there's even people that like leave a grocery store holding, they want to be seen as the people that buy certain things. Like, if you want to be the guy that walks out with bananas. Now, are you a person that eats bananas? You maybe don't even like bananas, but that's like okay, what does a grocery basket look like, right? What's an acceptable looking, to the outside eye, what is an acceptable looking grocery basket? And it's like, well, it has bananas, it has, kind of this balanced thing. And maybe even like people even buy balanced foods and they just don't eat them. Only because it's not even that they had an intention of like, oh, I want to eat this healthy food. It's just that it's the spectacle of, I want to be seen as the person that buys bananas and walks out, and maybe it's like in the off chance that you run into somebody, and they're like, oh, what'd you get there? Oh, you got meat, ground beef and bananas and eggs. Okay, cool. This looks nice. But then like the bananas just rot. It's like, you're not even eating the bananas. You're just getting them as like you want to be seen as a guy that buys bananas. It's like a healthy and normal thing, like out of a movie or something. Like when someone, is picking up groceries in a movie, they have like, what do they have in the grocery basket? I hear people buy stuff like that with no intention of actually eating it. They just want to be like, well, I want to be seen as like a normal, have a normal grocery haul, and not like, why'd you buy all this weird stuff? Maybe you actually want it, but doesn't fit the archetypical grocery basket, distribution of what's like a normal thing to buy at the grocery store. So I don't know. I would argue that there's even an amount of influence on the spectacle of somebody that buys certain types of groceries. And that's just an example. Obviously, I would extend that further to like clothes and other things that people buy to be seen as the person wearing these kinds of clothes, or to be seen as, it's all just kind of this, how do you look to the outside eye? Because it's more important the way you're perceived than the way you actually are, which I think is the wrong direction. I would imagine who you are is much more important than the way you're perceived. Not to say your perception is unimportant and you should actively try to be the opposite, but I worry that people are too concerned with their perception and less concerned with their actual, the contents of their own character, who they are themselves, their own moralities. They want to be seen as the person with these certain morals. It's like, well, are you that person, or you just want to be seen as that person? And I'd argue most people don't even give it the amount of thought necessary to really arrive. And so maybe I'm just not this person, and there's no even point of like being perceived as this person, because I'm just not. That's not me. I don't know. It's a interesting argument, at least, about the perception of being perceived as a person versus actually being the person. So anyway, speaking of, I guess, internet tools. So the internet gave us this like facade of infinite scalability. So if you're not, you should be doing something just because we have the possibility of doing something infinitely scalable to like the I guess the size of the globe. It's then kind of our duty on some levels to do things that aren't, and like avoid things that aren't scalable at all, because we have the capacity to be able to make change on a global level. And I think that is part of what discourages a lot of people from doing anything at all. Only because it's like, well, if I can't make, I see what the potential of like upside of the impact could be, and it could be on this global scale. I could change the way this is done forever. Well, if everyone does it, whatever. And versus my like minuscule change, it likely will never impact anybody outside of me and my immediate associates. So then, what's the point of really doing anything that, if it's not this global scale? Like if I'm going to write code, it should be, part of even the allure of being someone that writes code is that, well, it can be deployed anywhere, like across the whole world. It's like this, it's got this infinite scalability, underlying like possibility. It's like, it's exciting. And it's exciting in some levels, but I think it's unrealistic. Especially just given not everybody can worry about everything in the globe at all times. I think most people can't, and they have to be worried about precisely what's in their immediate vicinity. That is the only thing that should concern them, and the only thing that can concern them, really, and the only thing they have impact over. So it is completely wasted effort for them to be concerned with things that they truly have no impact over. And I think even being aware of it it's not worth the awareness of stuff that's going on outside their impact. That's why I almost said last time about like there's a certain amount of ignorance now that I think is wise, whereas it used to be any knowledge at all was wise because knowledge was in such short supply, and it was instead just, I don't know, other shit. But now it's like you're almost better off just not even knowing, and you're more of a wise person if you're like ignorant of the fact, or ignorant of stuff that goes on, because your mind is clear on what you do have impact over if there's less in your mind, period. So I don't know, but I guess speaking of internet technologies, it frustrates me when people call like, social media as a tool or something. It's like, well, it's like a hammer. It's like a tool. It just depends on how you use it. You can use a hammer to kill somebody. You could also use it to put up a painting. It's like, yeah, okay, well, the difference is people aren't staring at hammers for 12, 14 hours a day, right? People aren't crying over hammers. People aren't, you use a hammer for maybe 10 minutes. Even if you're going to kill a body, it's still only like a 10-minute thing. It's not like you're using the hammer for hours and hours and hours on end. No. And it's like, I think you can't compare, it's like comparing, I don't know, a fucking mustard seed to acres and acres of corn. It's like, well, it's still calories. Yeah, but we're talking about 5 calories versus 500 million calories. It's like, I just don't think it's a tool. I think it's closer to social media is to a tool in the same way that's like it's to a drug, right? Where it's like people like now, granted, there are drugs that genuinely help people. There are antibiotics. The antibiotics are good because people can die of infections. That's a good drug, but not everybody should be taking antibiotics all the time, right? That's how you ruin antibiotics. That's how it no longer is effective if everyone takes it. So it's a very, very limited use case. And I would argue that social media is the same. It's like a tool in the same sense that drugs are a tool. Even like recreational drugs. Like I think there's a difference between just chiefing and huffing marijuana all the time and, I don't know, doing it with your friends once in every 6 months or something like that, which I think is a more reasonable, like kind of tool-esque usage of otherwise illicit and kind of purposeless drugs. In the same way that social media is this tool in that sense, where it should be, there's very limited use case for it. So I don't know. I think equating it to something like a hammer is just fucking silly, and is a cop out for people who want to shit post on LinkedIn. And those people deserve jail time. And I would rather them be drug addicts probably than be LinkedIn addicts. Honestly, the amount of negative social impact of people who post on LinkedIn, it's probably more problematic than people that are heroin addicts on the side of the road. It's a joke. Anyway, I think social media is a tool in the same way that drugs are a tool. It's like, well, drugs have maybe very few and far between. There is a spot for it, right? But there's ultimately disastrous consequences that result from unabated behavior. That's like if we don't, or unchecked behavior, there's disastrous consequences from using social media. In the same way there's disastrous consequences using drugs. I'm not saying you can't, you take one puff of a joint and your life is over. It's not like, it's not heroin, but in the same sense, like you got to be careful with you using drugs, and you can use them for some kind of intended purpose or usage in the case of antibiotics, but you need to be very wary of that. And that's why I think social media is better to equate to drugs than they would be to a tool of some kind. But drugs also are a tool. They're a tool for battling illness at times. And I don't want to specify a certain kind of drug. I'm not saying it's weed or it's meth or something. But it's certainly like, maybe it's an antibiotic or something on some level. Not that it solves any kind of problems, but it should be used sparingly in the same sense that you want to use an antibiotic only when you have an infection, such that your body doesn't, gain antibodies to the antibiotics or something. So anyway, I'll move on to this. Let's see. I guess to wrap up the point about infinite scalability, to think about how to be satisfied in your life. One strategy, I suppose, is to set, and this is just my own view of it, is just to set small and stupid goals, like goals that you're not that are below your punching weight, for example, but goals just like, I want to set up a party for my friend or something. I want to get him, I don't know, it's just something, a small, stupid goal. But I think setting a goal of like, I want to revolutionize. It's like I realize that maybe some people feel this calling. They have this global aspiration, this global goal. But I worry that too often now it's seen as like this requirement that if your goals are small and silly, and if it's just like a goal, like I want to raise a family, like that is seen as like this, like a silly goal where it's like, well, it's stupid. You got to make a bigger impact. Like you have all these tools at your disposal, like social media and drugs. You should have maximize your impact. I don't think it. I think you can maximize the quality of your impact on smaller, more realistic, small, stupid goals in my mind, instead of trying to maximize impact in terms of numbers. Because then you're just kind of taking a shotgun to a problem that would require a sniper. I think if you really thought about it. So I don't know. I think setting small and stupid goals is one way to be satisfied in your life and satisfied with the goals that you have. Not to say that you shouldn't. I surely shouldn't set any goals. I think goal setting is an important part of like this human process where we have a goal, we have a vision of some kind, and we seek to achieve that. But I worry now that expectations are at their worst, and I would even equate this with with kind of the epidemic, so to speak, of mental illnesses and depression. And a lot of this is because of, of course, in my opinion, because of misaligned expectations. The expectation is that everybody can do all of this. The expectation is that everybody can buy their own house and own their own land and have jobs that pay a bunch of money and be the manager. It's like I think, not that we shouldn't have people or there shouldn't be aspirations towards some of that, because I think some of that is possible. But I think by and large, the expectations are far outweigh the actual capabilities of what we have. It's just too rosy a picture. I think we're too hopeful on like things turning around and changing, and even look over the lifespan of like a previous generation. I think one of the goals would have been to improve our relationship with the world and the climate, so to speak, and to kind of counteract a lot of that. It's only getting worse. It's even if you spend an entire career and life dedicated towards that goal, which is a noble goal, it would have objectively gone backwards, and so you'd have lived your whole life disappointed and essentially probably depressed of how shitty everything is. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't care about that on some level, but I worry that the goal is too lofty, and I realize that there's tools now that kind of are all here to sell you this lofty goal. Like, well, social media can impact, and everybody you can scale the company immediately. It's like there's all this promise of like infinite scalability and like impact on this global level, but it's just unrealistic. And it's also just not even. Most of the time, it backfires. It's not even like it works most of the time, because even if you are able to make a company that does what you want it to do, or achieve some moral end of yours, whatever that might be, I don't know. But odds are that you'll probably have to sell out, and not to be too cynical, but odds are you'll probably sell out at some point, and your company will perpetuate the issues that you sought to ameliorate in the first place. So you're literally just going backwards by doing all this, because it's the likelihood of somebody building a multi-billion-dollar ethical company is almost second to none, because you can always be undercut by the unethical person. And if people even have some kind of, I don't know, some gauge on an ethical company or not, I think that's even debatable. People, people still kind of deify companies that are objectively shit. And even the companies that might have good PR now, that's all PR. That's what that is. It's like you can manage the look of a company using all these quote unquote tools, aka drugs. And the same way everyone's like, well, these are great companies. It's a very ethical company. Leadership is great. It's like, okay, well, again, I want to believe that, but then I'm really not going to be surprised if it comes out that it's Epstein 3.0, with a new pedophile ring, and this time it's a Hispanic guy who's the Epstein, because we already had the white and black ones. But still, it's like, you really expect me to be surprised that like this whole company's run by pedophiles? No, I'm not at all. And I'm sure maybe it's not pedophiles every time. It's probably people probably mix it up. It's it's meth heads. It's people who have other kind of weird, sexual fantasies and drugs and stuff like that. But to act like there's these like, well, these are good companies and these are bad ones. It's like, no, they're all like, they all get there doing a lot of the same bad shit because that's what it required of you. It kind of requires this like playing game, with the institutions. You gotta play the game. You can't not play, or you don't really get there by not playing. I think people that have their whole PR thing is they don't play the game. Like I would even argue that like people like Trump or Musk are ones that like didn't play the game, but like still got to the top. But they just played the game. They played like the anti-game, which is more or less the same side of the game. They like truly not playing the game would have. You don't belong. You don't end up in that position by not playing the game. You play the game, and so I mean they all have done stuff that, again, on some level, I as someone who wouldn't play the game wouldn't have gotten that point. So you kind of get there. You have to sacrifice a lot to get there, and sometimes it's sacrificing things as simple as like your children, right? It's like, well, fuck my stupid kids. I don't care if they grow up to be shitheads. I need to achieve my my career aspirations. And so again, I'm not saying maybe it's worth you sacrificing your kids to build this company or something like that. But I think the odds in that actually happening or that being, I guess a smart or really ethical move, I would say it's not. I guess I wouldn't have kids if that would be the ultimate goal. But I mean, you still sacrifice a lot. You don't really. It's not like still kind of a zero sum game on some level. But anyway. Yeah, I suppose also with our goals and aspirations, it never really, like, this kind of is God of progress is, it's a silly question on the surface, at least. The question being like, where does it end? And I realize it's not. It sounds like a silly question. What do you mean? Where does it end? Like, we'll know when it ends. We'll know when to stop progress. It's like, well, will we? Probably not. It's like, well, what is the end? So there isn't like interplanetary species, okay? Or maybe suppose we are an interplanetary species, right? Who else to say that we're I guess even if we end up not being fascist or communist or some ridiculous, some super weird, terrible economic schema, and we're still this interplanetary species, then what? What was the point of that? Is it all just like, I guess it's all kind of for survival of the species at some point, but is it? Our planet would have been fine if we didn't fuck around with it, and we aren't, I guess, overpopulating the shit out of it and fucking with it. We probably would have been fine here until the sun kind of enveloped our. We'd found some way. Now, granted, our population probably couldn't have gotten as high as it is. There's all other kinds of, I suppose, arguments or kind of nuances to appreciate there. But even so, we had millions of years left before there was any actual real problems. Before we had to, truly be an interplanetary species. And even then, it's like, why though? Do we need to? Is it our really? I mean, you go in outer space. Outer space, our little meat bodies are so ill adapted, and it's like we're ill adapted for even like environments on our own planet. Like, you go live in Antarctica, you need like an igloo, you need all kinds of shit just to be able to not die up there. And even then, it's kind of a miserable existence unless you have the mentality for it, like a Eskimo person or whatever. But still, it's like, so I don't think we weren't really designed or intended to be this interplanetary species that are gods of the universe. So would it really have been that bad if we lived for, I don't know how many years, let's say it's 1 million years before the sun, or 10 million years before the sun envelops, our solar system. Would it have been that bad if we just kind of lived, humanity just kind of stayed here for 10 million years and just enjoyed it, and then when time came, we just said hallelujah or something and then just died. Like we obviously don't belong in space. You go in space for 5 seconds and you turn into a spaghetti noodle. I mean, it's not a place where that space does not want us up there. We're surely not designed for it at all. So it seems silly to me that that is like this end progress. And maybe fine. Maybe you take a little more conservative view and you say, well, the goal isn't this interplanetary species. The goal is to like achieve harmony or something with our planet. Well, didn't we have that prior to civilization and all that anyway? Weren't we kind of already there at this goal of like achieving harmony? We were at harmony with it, right? We kind of coexisted. All of the ancient kind of prehistoric tribes and things all had great reverence for the spirit world, these animals that they kill. They all, they blessed them or whatever. You see this in Native Americans, but it's more of like I don't know, makes them seem kooky or something like that. But we kind of had that harmony. And so if that was a goal, then didn't we just go backwards for 2,000 years or 5,000 years or 10,000 years or whenever? I guess agriculture was probably on the order of a couple 10,000 years ago or 15,000 years ago. But even so, we haven't gone backwards if that's the goal. I want to know where we're going, right? And I think nobody really has, even people on this like team of progress don't really have a great answer for that. It's just kind of a wishy-washy, well, it's like better in some way. Better for who and how and what way, right? I don't know. It's like I think there was a lot that was perfectly fine, I guess as nature and God intended before we, I don't know, I guess just made mistakes in terms of the agricultural revolution. But even so, I'm just the progress to me is interesting because it's like always just like, well, we should get better. Like it's fine the way it is, but it should get better. To what end, really? And I just don't know what it is that this I guess this myth or this God of progress is after, because that's really what the New Age religion is now, is just this never-ending like progress towards something. Maybe it's social progress, maybe it's economic progress, but how do you define that? And even so, if you're able to define it, progress towards this goal is illusory, or if anything, is paradoxical. Like the illusion of progress. Intended progress towards something actually moves you backwards. So again, my argument about this last time, I think, was, is it possible that through efforts trying to achieve some end, you could then inadvertently do the exact opposite? And then given that this is a potential result of wanting to do something and achieving the exact opposite, what is the likelihood or the pervasiveness of that actually occurring, in the sense that happens? And I would argue that more often than we probably do things that achieve the opposite of our intended result by trying to do exactly what that. So I think my argument the last time was like the task force of try not to kill the president. Like they make plans on like how somebody would kill the president or something, and then inadvertently they gave somebody the idea, not only the idea of what to kill, and then all the information on what to do. So it's like the president would have been safer if we just stopped and nobody did anything. And we just didn't make this stupid task force. And now we have a fucking mess to clean up because we tried to fix it and we fucked it all up. So on that level, shouldn't we be wary? Or, I mean, at least on some level, like I'm just wary of progress on that end, given that it has the potential and maybe the likelihood even of backfiring at any juncture. So even our fights and pursuits toward economic progress or equality or something ultimately make things less equal, right? It's like, who knows? And so maybe it's just all about like this fighting power dynamic, and there's some amount of like free marketism that needs to be in that. But I don't know. I don't really like any of that much as like these perfect solutions to things. I just don't think there is this God-given. The God-given solution would have been to stop fucking with stuff, is to put the hammer down at, step one, or put the axe down or whatever, and stick to cave paintings or something. But I don't know. I just think there's a lot that we probably fucked it up. And I don't mean to necessarily like, I guess glorify like the savage or the prehistoric human and say that they were, better than, they lived better than us. But I would argue that they certainly lived more in harmony with nature than we did. And if that's one of our goals of progress, is to be at harmony with things, then that's one thing. And also, like, people tend to think that it was completely miserable and everyone just died all the time instantly. It's like, they didn't. A lot of the diseases and things that we run into and have to deal with now are because of shitty diets, agriculture, diseases from animals that we weren't meant to be around, environments that we weren't meant to be in. So like the fact that we need all these things isn't evidence that the environment is like scary and gross and full of diseases. Diseases most of the time they didn't really get diseases, because they weren't living. They were living where they were supposed to, like they were at home where they were supposed to be, right? Their ancestors had lived in that area and knew the area and were at peace with everything there. It wasn't like they were constantly fighting off smallpox or something. Like these are all things that we did, as civilized people, so to speak. And even the word civilized, I guess, it kind of implies this superiority above people who are more simple. And it's telling on some levels because they used to rip these like savage people out. Like this happened a lot in like from the 1500s even to like the 18 and 1900s. Even today they still do this sometimes. But like so-called prehistoric or like kind of tribal people that live in weird little tribes in their area, they pull them out and like put them in London or something. And like most of them end up just saying, fuck you, I want to go back. I don't like this. They don't like and you could just say it's because they're not used to it or something. But I think they genuinely have like, well, they're doing this wrong. I don't think it's because of they don't know how to use an iPhone. I think it's actually because there's, they think it was a mistake to have done all this to nature and to the world around us. There's also it's apparently just this like power, this like human root of beauty, just looking into like a simple fire. And it got me thinking about ways that I could look into fire often. I do kind of think that there is some kind of I don't know, just some kind of deep anthropological connection to fire as one of our first, I suppose, inventions or gifts from the gods or something. And maybe that was a mistake too. I don't know. I'm not here to draw lines, but I do think there is some kind of primal peace and tranquility that you get by looking into a fire. So I was thinking in ways in my life. I guess you can get a candle would be a simple way to do it, but it's funny that there is still some kind of power in looking at a fire, and it's like, why do we still even do the fires? Like we have better ways of heat, but yet we still like enjoy campfires. We still kind of crave this like tribal, and I don't know, even just being in nature, like national park. Why do you have national parks? Just make them all into Starbucks or something. It's like, I think we obviously there's some cognitive dissonance here where we like know certain things are good for us, but we don't really know why, and we aren't able to justify them using our fancy civilized language and using our terms of morality and engagement. That then we still like find weird ways to compensatorily have national parks and fires. And maybe, I guess, if you are the true techno accelerationist, you'll banish all of that and say everything should be Starbucks or McDonald's. But still, there is some kind of. It's funny that we do find ways to look into fire, like I think we're supposed to, and have like celebrations and things which again is all kind of even is tribal human people. Tribal Homo sapiens did all that. Every night they had the fire and they danced and whatever. Not all of them, but I'm just saying, by and large, there was a lot of that was very common in a lot of different tribes, and they all had their own thing and their own, and it been based off the geography that they lived around and their own history as humanish people, I suppose. I guess they were humans, but they just weren't. They're the uncivilized humans, which I think is sounds more derogatory than how I mean it. I don't mean it as a derogatory thing, but yeah. Anyway, I'll stop talking about ancient humans and yeah. I said I don't think we were meant to conquer planets. I guess the only olive branch I'll extend with conquering planets is as I do think space is a fine place for like I guess the robots and things we send out there, which I think should be really the extent of our thing. But even that, I worry that it's a slippery slope with like accepting certain technologies and banishing others. And even just like properly defining the term technology, I worry draws a line. But we're like, what do we define as technologies? Like, is fire a technology? Like, well, technically, maybe, I suppose, to cook things. And I think very few people would argue that fire is holistically bad. And I probably would draw technology in a line to where where fire is a good technology. But I worry at all just calling things technologies and not uh, create separation between like goodness and badness that is more nuanced in nature. Maybe it's just the fixation with being too procedural and binary with things. I think there's a certain, I talked about this before, but a certain intuition, like intuitive yes and intuitive no, that that somebody in touch with their human faculties would should know, right? Like I think somebody in touch would say fire yes, but then like gambling apps no, right? I don't think there shouldn't be much gray area there. Like I don't think anybody should ever argue that gambling apps are a good technology, so to speak. Like the wheel, sure, right? But like a Tesla autopilot that whatever, maybe not. I don't know. Even like a car, maybe we would say no. I just don't know. I think there's a lot of there is some kind of intuitive kind of evolutionary yes or no, and you could argue, I suppose, on one level, this is just a some biological neural nets answer to yes and no about what's good and what's bad. But ultimately, I think the human does know what's best for it. Like we do know what's good for us and what isn't. So I think on some level that should have merit. I don't think it's just because it's a human thing doesn't mean it should be bad. I think that's one thing with like technology being obsolete is like people now say like, well, adopt this before you'll be made obsolete. Obsolescence should be reserved only for non-human things. Like a charger could go obsolete. That's fine. Or a old protocol should go obsolete. But now we're like describing humans as going obsolete, and like you'll be obsolete as a human, which I don't you see where you're now describing again fellow man as an obsolete being. So man is now just a means to an end. So you realize the implication of humans going obsolete, not just the technology being obsolete. Because now it seems that the technology obsolescence of technology is fine. I think on some because you can replace them with something better. But then it's like now we're just saying humans are obsolete, and that's almost a call for genocide on some level. It's like we'll kill these people, and maybe it's not genocide on a certain of genealogy. So it's a genocide of like a socioeconomic side, right? If you're poor, you deserve to die, right? Or if you don't work this job, you deserve to die. Or if you're even like if you think these things, you deserve to die. Which I think is a very why who gets to make those decisions, and why is it you and not me, right? It's like it's like I just don't I worry that making a decision at all is you shouldn't be allowed to do that. That should be it's a bad thing to make wide casting judgments on who deserves to live and who doesn't based off of some arbitrary measure of obsolescence, right? I think, but I've noticed now that there's even language around describing humans as obsolete, which I just think is abhorrent on the moral level, and that should alarm bells should if a healthy person should have alarm bells blaring in their head if they see like you don't go obsolete, you need these skills, or you need to like know how to train AI or something like that. I don't know, but I saw that and I was like sick, just because I'm like the implication of that is terrible. So one way I've tried to adopt my life philosophy such that I am just more at peace with things around me, more equanimous. I can achieve some kind of tranquility in my daily affairs. Is to be, well as being true to my kind of cynical, skeptical view on things, which I think is mostly a good thing in today's day and age. Only because there's the lack of that will cause you to go crazy and not recognize yourself. But the saying I have now is that I'm easily satisfied but not easily impressed, meaning that I'm my level for a satisfactory anything, a meal, a place to sleep, a conversation, a person, is I'm easily satisfied with any of that. I'm not often like yearning for more. I'm not desperately hungry for whatever it is. But I do think it's good to not be easily impressed. So the fact that so me saying to myself that I'm easily satisfied but not easily impressed, I think is good, because I think high standards are very important. You should have high standards for yourself and on some level for others that you want to hold to those standards. But the thing is, if you always have high standards for everything all the time and you impose those standards, to a T, you'll end up being miserable because unfortunately, if your standards are high enough, most things are low quality because otherwise that's how you got those standards is by looking at the best of the best. But most of it is crap now. And so the issue with that is that then you're miserable all the time. So the saying is that for me is that I'm easily satisfied but not easily impressed. So I think that's good. The other thing about that is it's related to the spiel on expectations. The importance of expectation is like the amount of you could draw a line here between satisfaction of some kind and even happiness could be related. But it would be the distance from your expectations to the perceived reality. So expectations are so much, and the perceived reality is not reality itself. I think that's the other important caveat of that little phrase. So it's a distance from expectations to perceived reality. So one way of being satisfied with things is to distort your reality such that you meet the expectations, right? You want to be famous. So I guess if you're getting 1,000 followers on LinkedIn makes you feel famous, your perceived reality is that you're famous. You've met those expectations. Of course, the expectation in general would be the other thing that I would argue you should have. You should exhibit some, some control over at least to say, well, how smart are these expectations to have in the first place? And then I think you can be more honest about your reality. And instead of it being maybe your perceived reality, which is always subjective anyway. So every reality is a perceived reality, but ultimately not one that I think you have to be overly delusional about, right? I think if your expectations are set well, your perceived reality can be pretty damn close to whatever anyone else would call your reality too. I don't know that it would have to be something where it's like, this person's nuts. They think they're famous because they have 1,000 followers on LinkedIn. So I think that is another little formula for, being satisfied with or happy with the way your life is going is to have, think deeply about your expectations and then be as honest with yourself as you can about your reality. And that's why I said the expectations sometimes should just be stupid small goals, like small and stupid goals. They're meaningless to most other people. No one cares, and it's fine. No one has to care about all your goals and things. That's okay. But I also wouldn't go out of your way to make goals that impose behaviors and ways from other people. Like I think making even career goals sometimes is a problem because so maybe it's not worth it. It's like I want to be the vice president or something, but like what you'd have to sacrifice to get there. Do you know what you have to sacrifice to get there? Do you know, is it just hard work and weekends, or are you going to have to, do a couple bribes, to bury a body, use the hammer the wrong way or something? I don't know. I'm just saying it's not, and I think now more than ever, I think it's people are so desperately trying to achieve their heightened expectations that they're willing to do more abhorrent things. Whereas maybe it wouldn't be the prerequisite, 50 years ago to do terrible things to reach the VP position. But now that there's so much more demand for these high expectations and everybody wants that, you'll get beaten out by somebody who's just willing to do things that you shouldn't be willing to do, right? And I think that's even what we see with a lot of people that kind of achieve a lot of success on paper. They end up as miserable because they know what they gave up and they wish they didn't, but the thing is they were so, I guess, hell-bent on achieving their, meeting their expectations, which I would argue needed a second look, that they end up miserable because they sacrifice something they weren't willing to. A lot of times it's family. I mean, the number of people with $1 million who are divorced must be insane, or $1 billion who are divorced is laughable, right? It's like which is clearly just a choice, right? It's a choice between, the marriage or whatever you committed to, the children that you have, and your career or money, really, I suppose. So it's like, well, they're not worth that money for you. The time you spend, because it's not even like, I'm not saying it's impossible to balance all that at once, but part of relationships that work require work and they require time, which then you cannot spend that time towards other things like your career. So you have to make decisions sometimes. And I hope it's just not too binary now where it's like you either get to choose one or the other. I imagine there is still some middle ground, but ultimately it's like, then where do you fall if things go the wrong way? Do you fall on behalf of sacrificing your career for your family, or is it the family that goes for your career? Then what do you have? what's left? I always ask people that want this boat. The boat analogy is always the one I come to, it's just because I think it's funny. It's like, so you do all this to get on a boat and you're out there. And it's like, who's going to be on the boat with you? You left everybody behind because you needed to be on this boat so bad. Because it would have been, the boat sounded great when you had friends and people liked you and you didn't sell out your soul. But now you have the boat and you sold everything you have. Who's on the boat with you? You're on the boat by yourself. Are you enough, really? It's like, and maybe, I guess it's fine if you're antisocial and you want to be on the boat alone, but the boat's more fun with people that you want there and that want to be there with you and not that you've paid them to be there, right? Hookers on the boat is not going to be somebody, you're going to turn that boat around in 3 days because it's not going to be something that's going to satisfy you deeply. So I don't know. I just have lots of opinions on that. And I'm worried the direction that the society is going at large, where you have people have to select between it's either or. You can't do all of it, right? You either have to be the careerist and sacrifice what no one else is willing to sacrifice, or give it up. And I worry that the expectations of the internet places on people to have certain things, and the problems, because even social media itself, everyone knows that it creates unrealistic expectations for people. But I think being aware of it doesn't absolve you from its from its biases. It's like, I'm aware of my biases, therefore like I can avoid them. It's like, I think it doesn't. You being aware of it doesn't make it any less. It still controls you very much so. It's like you being aware that something is unhealthy doesn't make it healthier. You're still eating unhealthy food. No amount of awareness makes the food healthy now. You realize that, right? The awareness would go, okay, maybe it's unhealthy. I'm not going to eat it. Therefore, I'm aware of these biases. Maybe I should just not read an article written by a Nazi. And it's like, so if you want to have that, if you're worried about your biases, awareness only goes so far. And part of the awareness, I would argue, around social media in general is to be aware that it is a trap. It's a trap for your expectations. It's a trap socially. It's a trap psychologically. So it's a drug I wouldn't want to take. And not say there's not a time and place for taking drugs like antibiotics or, whatever, a puff of a joint, with whoever, who cares. Sometimes maybe there is, I'm not saying it's always I'm not going to draw a hard line and say no, but just be wary of what it is. It's not a hammer. It's closer to a drug. And some people get addicted to drugs and they throw their life away. And that's, if you're willing to risk that, then fine. That can be the world you exist in. So anyway, let's see. I'll move on to something else here. Let's see. I suppose I guess this is a related little haiku that I have. I just wrote down here, clever idiots win, which I think is one way to put, I guess, the prototypical winners of today's day and age. I would argue that they're not stupid people, so they're not pure idiots, but they're ultimately not, I would say, like the most wise. And maybe clever is like the wrong word here. I'm not meaning clever as in like a substitute for like raw intelligence of any kind. I just mean like clever in terms of its ability to see novel pathways on things, right? And sometimes it's clever. If you're clever with language, you can see novel ways to phrase things. If you're clever with tools, you can see novel ways to fix certain things, with your hands. If you're clever with code, you can find an interesting way to abstract a problem in some sense, whatever. So, but I would argue the clever idiots are the people that win. So they're clever enough to be able to, maybe create some kind of niche online business, or to find a way to, to get on that boat, with a low down payment. I don't even know what the fuck these, people do to, whatever. But I still call them idiots on some level because often their thinking never reaches the depth of what I would argue is of utmost importance, of the philosophical, in terms of why do they, what are they after? What are they doing with all this? I realize that there's plenty of clever ways to make money, but the act of making money and the ends of making money are for what? And what are those ends? Right? Is it you really want to be somebody that solves world hunger? Are you still going to be that same person after you've done everything that you've sacrificed what you can to get that money? Are you still going to be the person that wanted to solve world hunger? Are you just chasing a childhood fantasy? Like, is there some amount of just nostalgia that you're after that you won't find in trying to solve all this problem? Filling the void with money, so to speak. But I worry that just too many people that do succeed and have the effort and dedication don't ever reach this point where they think truly deeply about what the point of their ends are, right? And a lot of times it's not like simple traditional things. It's not like I want to be a good person to the people around me. I want to support. It often never meets that. Those people stopped playing, stopped being clever. They stopped playing the game. They stopped doing all of it because they probably realized, and I would argue intelligently so, that it's a waste. And there's even cleverer way to do that. These are just clever people. They're not clever idiots. The clever idiots, I would say, are idiotic enough to delude themselves into certain fantasies and certain ways of doing things. But of course, they're clever enough to actually execute. I think the idiots are the ones that don't ever give it any thought and then end up kind of in a purgatory of sorts, that their life is just on some kind of flywheel, which sometimes is indistinguishable from the clever person. They might look like an idiot, but truly maybe they are the most clever, only because they've realized that, as they said in Shawshank, salvation lies within. So maybe they really achieved inner peace with what they do every day. But I think the real idiot just remains aspirational, whereas the clever idiot is able to delude themselves into certain mythologies of fixation and expectation, as well as certain, again, perceived realities that allow them to think that they've made it, or know that they're going to make it, or think that making it has any kind of real bearing on what that even means. What is making it or failing? What is that? These are entirely subjective and almost superfluous things to even call. Making it and not making it, success and not success. This isn't. What are you talking about? Can we define those? Is it a number that defines those? Is it a number of children that define those? Is it a number of sexual encounters that this define? And maybe if you're stupid enough to really think that a number of sexual encounters is your definition of success, and you can live through that, I would argue that you are a clever idiot and you win, and that's what happens. So anyway, I'll wrap it up there this time. So thanks for watching. Peace out.